The footage then cuts immediately to scenes of people fighting.
Actually spliced together the presentation. He said, we're going to go down and we're going to cheer on our senators and our House members. And then it actually goes on to saying some of them we might not be able to. And that line about it, we fight and fight like hell, is actually later in the speech, and yet your video makes it look like those two things came together. That's the type of messaging here that so many people in my country find frustrating, is that it's hard to actually get the facts.
Now,
hello and welcome to Off the Party Line with me, Mark Williams, and today I'm going to be reacting to the explosive reporting done by the Telegraph on the BBC's bias against the US President Donald Trump. This investigation is looking at two recordings, one from BBC Newsnight and the other from BBC Panorama, two of the flagship news shows on the BBC, where they intentionally, goes the allegation, spliced together two parts of a speech that were well far apart in the actual original speech. They've put them together to make it sound like Trump said something that he didn't say. This has caused a massive furore, and Trump is now threatening to sue the BBC. The Telegraph has done fantastic reporting on this, so we're going to watch a clip from the Daily Tea podcast, which is the Telegraph's daily podcast with Camilla Tominey and Tim Stanley. The whole podcast is well worth a watch. It's about 20 minutes long. They've done a shorter version, which is what we're going to be reacting to today. So without any further ado, let's get into it.
Episode of Newsnight in which they were discussing the congressional hearings and Donald Trump's role in the January 6th riots.
We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
So that is what Newsnight originally put out. And at least in the Newsnight one, they left in the bit where he said about we're going to go and support our brave senators and congressmen and women. In then the Panorama one, they didn't even include that. So in the Panorama one, it just went from we're going to march down to the Capitol and we're going to fight like hell. Totally dishonest. And then here is the original, so you can see that.
We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
And the footage then cuts immediately to scenes of people fighting.
The footage then cuts immediately to scenes of people fighting. So it's obvious what they're trying to do here. They're trying to show, and remember, at the point that Trump is giving this speech, the events of January the 6th have not yet happened. They're trying to show retrospectively that Trump incited what eventually ended up happening. You may believe that that's what happened, but he did not say what they showed him saying.
seamlessly, so it does make it seem as if fight like hell came immediately after the initial statement,
Yes.
when in fact it came 54 minutes later in that.
54 minutes. That's how long was between those two statements, which, as Camilla rightly says, was cut seamlessly. If you watch that original edit, you would have no idea. It seems like the sentence just flows, but the BBC have completely dishonestly put the two together to suggest that that was all one big sentence.
Particular speech. Kirsty Walk then brings in two contributors to react to the footage and to speak about the whole story. One of them is Kadia Gober. She's a politics reporter for BuzzFeed. She was on the ground at the time of the Capitol riots that day. And then they also speak to Mick Mulvaney, who was Donald Trump's chief of staff from 2019 to 2020.
Just keep that in mind. So this guy was Donald Trump's chief of staff before this happened. Okay, just keep that in mind as he speaks.
Video, and I'm no apologist for the president.
No, I'm not suggesting you are. I'm not suggesting you are, but what I'm saying.
If you didn't catch that, what he said is, I'm no apologist for the president. I quit my job over this. Okay, so this guy was totally disgusted with what happened on January the 6th, but he's not an apologist for the president because of that. But take a note of what he says.
Saying saying is that
your video actually spliced together the presentation. He said, we're going to go down and we're going to cheer on our senators and our House members. And then it actually goes on to saying some of them we might not be able to. And that line about it, we fight and fight like hell, is actually later in the speech. And yet your video makes it look like those two things came together. That's the type of messaging here that so many people in my country find frustrating, is that it's hard to actually get the facts.
Now,
Exactly. This is part of the problem. This guy is not an apologist for Trump. He's not an apologist for what happened on January the 6th. And yet he has, in the moment, so as soon as he's seen that video, and this is on Newsnight, and he's with Kirsty Walk, he is pointing out, you can't do that, okay? Is it not bad enough what actually happened? Is there not enough material from what Donald Trump actually says? As I say, there was 54 minutes in between those two things. You couldn't find anything in 54 minutes. Trump talks for hours. You really have to put this stuff together. And as he says, and this is the key point, this is what people find frustrating, is that they can't get the real facts, because the people who are supposed to be the trusted news organizations, like the BBC, are misrepresenting and misleading their audiences. Disgraceful.
crucially, what also makes this worse, Tim, is that we have spoken to a whistleblower who worked on Newsnight at the time that recalled this. We spoke to David Chaudhry during the week to find out what happened the following day when he attended, along with others, an editorial meeting.
Then in the editorial the next day, one producer said, how did that go out? Why did that happen? And the editorial editor, not the VT editor, kind of brushed it off. And I thought that was extraordinary, that something like that had gone out, but it was the BBC. And when you're in that milieu, you kind of don't question things. I'm just there for the graphics. That's what I do. They don't really listen to you.
So he said a couple of things there that are important. It sounds like one of the producers actually did raise this in the meeting the next day. It was picked up pretty quickly. How did that go out? And it was brushed aside. Why was it brushed aside? Well, it's because of the second point that he makes. It's the BBC. When you're in that milieu, you don't question things, right? That's how this stuff happens. Because when you're in the BBC, this vaunted organization that is the voice of truth, people just assume that that's what's happening. And yet all of their biases are all in there and nobody questions them. This situation is a complete disgrace. And frankly, the BBC needs to pay a heavy price for it. You can't do this to people. And I don't care who it is. You can't do this to Donald Trump. You can't do it to Kamala Harris. Frankly, when the media were making edits for Kamala Harris, it was to her favor. There was some media organizations in America caught making edits that made her sound a lot more cogent than she actually was. When it's Donald Trump, it goes against him. Why is that? It's dishonest whether you're doing it to Trump, Harris, Jeremy Corbyn, Keir Starmer, Kemi Badenoch, Vladimir Putin. It doesn't matter who it is. You've got to take what they say and you can't make them say something that they haven't said. But frankly, this just shows what we all know about the BBC, because they don't do it to other people. They do it to him for a reason. They loathe him. And they let that cloud every time they report on him. They don't see that they've done anything wrong because they fundamentally believe that their role is to oppose him. There are still people in the world, plenty of them, who believe that Trump called white supremacists very fine people. Why do people still believe that? Well, because organizations like the BBC have never bothered to educate their audiences on the fact that that never actually happened. You'll talk to highly intelligent people who will tell you with a straight face that he did that. And he didn't. Here's a line from the article in the Telegraph. An internal memo by Michael Prescott, who spent 3 years as an independent external advisor to the broadcaster's editorial guidelines and standards committee, said, examining the charge that Trump had incited protesters to storm Capitol Hill, it turned out the Panorama had spliced together 2 clips from separate parts of his speech. This created the impression that Trump said something he did not, and in doing so, materially misled viewers. A BBC spokesman said, the BBC holds itself to the highest editorial standards. This matter has been brought to our attention, and we are now looking into it. But here's the problem. It doesn't hold itself to the highest editorial standards. I personally haven't consumed any BBC News output for coming on to 10 years. I knew they were lying to me back in the Brexit days, and I've not gone back ever since. BBC, like pretty much every other organisation, completely beclowned itself during the whole COVID situation, and yet I'm still forced to pay for it because I want to watch live football through a completely different broadcaster. I've got to pay the BBC licence fee. Apparently, according to a lot of commentators, this is just all some right-wing coup. Yeah. All right, keep telling yourself that. Trump is now threatening to sue the BBC for a cool $1 billion. Frankly, I don't blame him. You don't have to like the guy, don't have to support the guy to see that he's been seriously wronged. The BBC is long past due a major overhaul. It needs to be cut down to size, like so many massive British institutions that have got bloated and gone well beyond their original purpose. Something needs doing. It needs to stop its current funding model, and it needs to turn into some sort of commercial enterprise, or find some other way of paying for it, because in its current guise, it's not fit for purpose. It's an ideologically captured leftist organisation, and that's all there is to it. It has no idea why people continue to criticise it. It absolutely does not get it. Well, maybe this will help. You only have to look at the slew of former presenters and journalists from the BBC who've since left the BBC, free of the shackles of neutrality, free of this bondage of having to keep their real opinions to themselves. They've all been able to spread their wings and tell us their real thoughts on their podcasts. And as it turns out, they all think exactly what we all knew they thought all along. Make no mistake, this is a real crisis for the BBC. And if they continue to bury their heads in the sand, it's only going to get worse. Please do leave me your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, please do give me a nice big thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.